We're going to take your questions and tag as many small business owners as you can, so that we can get started and share as much information with you as possible. While we're getting started with making introductions, of course, I'm Pastor Nick, and to the center, the illustrious Bishop David G. Evans.
Lord have mercy.
Right. Right.
The Lord's still working on him. You all can tell, right?
Yeah. No. Look, we glad to have you, man.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And of course, you guys know this is a Jane Ellen Miller from last time, and Reverend Pastor Richard White down bottom, and Sister Deborah Dickerson just came in. Hello.
Hey, Deb.
Hey, Deb.
Hey, Deb.
And then Pastor Winfred Sanders is with us as a guest. We're so glad that he can join us this evening. So again, please do us a favor and share as much as you can as we get ready to go live and get to this discussion on small business owners. Maybe what we can do is, if everybody can do like a brief introduction of who they are and what they do, and kind of add some credibility to the conversation. I'm sure they know who me and Bishop are already. So Jane, we'll start with you and work our way down.
Okay, sure. Currently, I work for a small company. We were just discussing what constitutes small. And I never thought of them as small until I realized that they qualified for the CARES Act and getting that funding, right? Which is very different from your local barbershop or hair salon, because we had a CFO who knew how to fill out that paperwork. So our typical folks with their businesses going in and doing that paperwork was more than a notion. So what I learned is I work for a small company, they're a $30 million company, so I didn't consider that small. And I serve in the role as vice president of IT at the largest community college in Maryland. And while I am working remote, I think I'm actually busier than ever, because we've got 30,000 students who are having to learn remote. So we've got to make sure that technology is working at all times. While I do that, I also have a company, the Miller Consulting Group, that my son and I started, and I actually found out that he's actually the brains in the family. He's always been an entrepreneur. He actually started a new business while we are in this pandemic. I truly believe that often out of challenges and chaos comes innovation and opportunity. So I'm learning from him how to have the successful business, because he's been doing that for about 15 years. So 15 years. So, sometimes they say out of the mouths of babes, he would not be happy with me calling him a babe, but as long as he's my son, that's what he is. But you learn a lot. And I've watched him with his successes and with those things that have quote unquote failed, but you just start all over again. Get up, get it, do another one. So I'm in the corporate world, but I'm in the entrepreneur world. So I'm hoping I could add to this conversation.
Sure. Pastor White.
Hey, well, good evening, everybody. And as Pastor Nick said, Rich White here, been associated with both Bishop and Pastor Nick for 30 years now. So Pastor Nick was just a little toddler running around at that time. But nevertheless, I've been fortunate to work in mostly corporate roles, having been around the world, traveled, just came back from Europe a little while ago. But I work for what I consider a small specialty chemical company now. I'm a chemist with an MBA. That's what I am. And it's a $1.3 billion business, and I run a third of the business globally. So I have had a lot of interaction with a lot of smaller business partners that we have, and hopefully I can add some value to this conversation also. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Winfred Sanders, bivocational pastor. I pastor Grace Baptist Church. I co-own a business called Netta Scientific. I am the president. My wife is the CEO. We are a global business. We have about 50 employees. Um, our our revenue is pretty significant. I'll just leave it at that. And I hope I can add something to the discussions. The markets we serve, we're one of the few African American companies, woman-owned. We serve the healthcare industry as well as laboratory supplies and R&D and research and development. Most of our customers are the top pharmaceutical companies in the world. They include Pfizer, Merck, and so forth and so on. And we've been in the business for 20 years. We celebrated our 20th anniversary in 2020.
Great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Deborah Dickerson. I also come from corporate America. I worked many years with American Express in a global capacity, and then a year and a half ago transitioned to actually an MBE, Minority Business Enterprise. So I'm currently driving the operations at this company, and we plan strategic meetings and innovative experiences for our customers. In addition to that, I also manage a commercial cleaning business along with my husband, and I'm hoping that I can add something to this conversation as well.
Good. So that's everybody, Bishop and I, but I'm gonna get into actually start the first question with Bishop and get him to talk about some stuff in a minute. But again, please do us a favor and share, get a small business owner on so they can watch. Now, you guys mind if I jump in the deep end first?
Okay.
I wonder sometimes, do we give minority business owners the same chances we give non-minority business owners? So you get messed over by one minority business owner. You say, I'm not using black folk no more because they ghetto, they do so-and-so. But then we'll allow somebody else that doesn't look like us do the same thing. But we don't say we're no longer using that anymore. So Bishop, when you started your cleaning business, did you ever have to deal with any of this? First, you could chime in on that particular topic.
Okay.
And did you ever have to deal with anything when you were running your cleaning business as it relates to you being a minority walking through the door?
Yes. It goes back to being an African-American male with an economics degree, applying for positions at banking institutions, and it automatically being assumed that I wasn't as qualified as my white counterparts. In that context, it's either sink or swim, because when I was out there, we didn't have aggressive mentors. And the first mentor I had in the banking industry was a white man named Jay Hill. Now, he was the eccentric guy around the bank, but he was the top producer in the bank. He recognized the disparity in treatments between myself and my counterparts and took me under his wing. And that's what saved my banking career. He taught me everything I needed to know. I listened attentively. But when I went to the next bank, I had to prove myself all over again and found out that the institutional racism in the banking industry is sophisticated, very well oiled, and they have no fear. They have no fear of expressing themselves. It was in that context that I got asked, how does it feel to be the missing link between apes and men in a board meeting? And I won't waste your time telling you what I said, but I didn't lose my job, but I did make my point. And I lost the fellowship of a lot of my counterparts in the bank. I left banking and went into business. And the reality was that my mother had been an entrepreneur, and I had worked with her since I was about 9 years old. So I understood business, I understood discipline. I also understood how hard it was, especially starting out. I found that, especially when I went into business and really started to grow, by the time Nabisco and Tasty Cake and Philadelphia Electric and those types of entities were my customers, it was almost like a rebaptism every time I walked through the door. Had to prove that I could do it, even though I came with good recommendations, but also I was expected to fail because they normally called me in when my Caucasian counterparts had failed at their company. And so I think it's systemic. And I think if it's not something that you can mentor people through this, counsel them through, but they have to be open to the realities that this is oftentimes the environment for us in corporate America and in business America.
Good. Pastor Sanders, you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. My career is a little different. I started off as a scientist, a researcher, and I moved from research when Hewlett Packard asked me to come to be a general manager for one of their business entities. It was a technical job. And what I did was I started to watch and to learn exactly how they did business. They sent me to Wharton School to get a certificate in marketing. So one of the things I was able to do is to understand the dynamics, so specifically how they operated. What were the credos? What was the mission? What were the customers? And when I decided to leave industry, it was because I saw a void. I saw that there was an opportunity for a black owned business or woman owned business. And one of the problems, and I think Bishop Evans has addressed it very well, is the people who were in our space were not delivering. Now I'm talking about African Americans. They were always financially having problems. They couldn't deliver the products and services. And Bishop is 100% correct because they don't have access to cash. And the only way you can get access to cash is you have to go to the bank. So what I did and my wife did, we decided to put our own money up. We said that, you know what, I'm not going to go through that banking process where I have to, get into deep debt. And we actually decided to get in a sweet spot of the market in science. There's not a lot of African American people in the science and the healthcare industries where we were. So we didn't have that problem with competition because at the time, they were trying to fill some diversity needs. So that gave us an opportunity to get in. But most of the people who gotten into that space, they didn't perform. And so as a result of that, they were moving from one black person, one black business to another. So we decided that we wanted to have a one motive. Our goal and motive was if it's not sustainable and profitable, we're not going to get in. But you are 100% correct. You have one time to fail. Your counterparts get 2 or 3 times. You fail one time. It's like brush fire that goes through the industry. Everybody thinks that you're a failure. So we had to be. And the other thing too, I think that Bishop is 100% correct. Sometimes you have to listen, and sometimes you have to swallow a lot of stuff that normally you wouldn't like to. You have to. Some of the negativity that's going to come back at you, you have to be able to, to be able to sometimes not speak out. You have to listen, but whenever you get that opportunity, but you can't be so passive that you don't express that you are a business and you're in business for the purpose of making money, and you're not here just because of the fact that it's a set aside program and that you're trying to get the money. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll let somebody else speak. When we go into business, we don't go in as a black business wanting 5 or 10%. I'm going in, I want 90%. If the white boy gets 90%, that's what. Don't give me 10%.
Yeah.
Tell me how I can get the whole pie, because I don't want to be satisfied with a part of it when everyone else is getting the whole cake.
Absolutely.
So that's it. But banking can be a problem, and I think the larger we got, the more we really started to see when we had to get credit lines, the kind of things they wanted us. In order to get a credit line, we had to also guarantee that if we defaulted on it, that means you got to put up your house, your everything else as collateral. So that's the difference. And we didn't deal with banks when we felt they were not dealing with us fairly. But that's neither here or there. Sorry.
It's okay. So you guys, sorry, good, Bishop.
They win. One of the things that I tried to do when I was in commercial lending, and we're talking back in the 80s, most of my white counterparts had 25 or $50,000 in lending authority.
Yep.
But I had $1 million in my own authority.
Wow.
And I went on a mission to remove some of the hurdles for those people that I could help. And since a lot of our businesses were in the under $1 million range,
Yep.
needed loans of like 250, 500, 750. I started a niche which grew because we were a national bank. Suddenly I was getting calls from Black businesses around the nation and was able to give them those lines of credit for $500,000, 750,000 or $1 million. And a lot of them are successful today because they had that leg up, but they were
Yeah.
getting turned down in the bank that I was in.
Wow.
But
Wow. And that does happen too,
yeah.
and one of the things is you made mention that you had a mentor.
Mhm.
Every person in the bank does not see an African American business in the same light.
Right.
You could have one guy who is a VP of the bank who may be very open to help you, and have another guy who will put every roadblock in front of you.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Ask you
so
for your firstborn child.
yes.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I'd like to just jump in here for a minute. So as I said earlier, I work for an MBE, and we have been in business for 30 years. And when I listen to the stories that my CEO shares with me about having to go to the bank and get a line of credit or increase his line of credit, he says exactly what you said, Bishop. It's like they need his firstborn child before they will proceed with him. And when you've
Absolutely.
established yourself and your credit is stellar and you've been consistently in business for 30 years,
Yep.
it has to be systemic racism that blocks you from what you actually aren't not entitled to, but deserve. That fair treatment, that equal treatment. And it's
Yeah.
always a challenge each and every time.
I watched a gentleman get a multi-million-dollar loan. I think it was about $25 million. And he just come out of bankruptcy.
Whoa.
And when he was a former employee at RCA, went into his own business, went belly up, came to us for a loan at the bank, and nothing about the guy qualified him except this: he's a nice guy. They actually said it.
Whoa.
He's a nice guy.
Yeah.
And by that time, I was the lead producer in the region. So I spoke up and I said, well, I don't understand how we turned down this guy from Trenton, stellar credit, great deposits in the bank, and we give 25 million to this guy who's a nice guy but unqualified, but won't give this guy $500,000, for what he needs it for. And that's when I got the explanation about the red line.
Yeah.
It was invisible, but 5 minutes from Trenton, they had red line Trenton.
Yeah.
So it's real.
Yeah. So,
but they can be overcome.
Yeah. So let me throw this in here then. A lot of minorities see networking as butt kissing. We gotta talk about it, right? That's
yeah.
Well, it depends on. Let's put it this way: you have to define that word, because networking can be very, very beneficial to you if you know how to network.
Right.
If you have a slave mentality, it probably is butt kissing.
Yeah.
But if you going in and believing that you have value and that you're not willing to accept anything, let me just give you. We're in this. We started to pivot and sell PPE products because the opportunity came.
Sure.
And so we went to a bank, and we had a good credit line with 2 or 3 banks. And so we were doing a lot of business with one particular bank. And we said, hey, look, we get into the PPE market. A lot of our products are going to be coming in from China. And we just thought it would be a wise idea to have additional credit line, but we didn't want to deal with the same bank. We wanted to diversify. gave them the financials. They came back to us and said, "Yep, okay, you look good, but we want a guarantor of the loan. So you got to be the guarantor of this loan. So not the company, not on your revenue. We want you to put your own personal, properties as a guarantor." So we said no. They were shocked. They said, and we said no. We said, if you can't give it to us on the merits of the business, then we're not going to accept it. So they said, okay, fine. Then a month ago, they came back and said, well, it looks like things are going well. I said, well, you should have gotten on board with us because, we've done extremely well. And we're willing to open up the credit line with you now. And we said, no, we don't want it. And we plan to divest our interest in your bank.
Absolutely.
And they have been pleading with us, saying, what can we do? I said, absolutely, you can't do nothing now.
Nothing.
I said, because when we had opportunity, and there was some risk in the game, and you didn't want to put any skin in the game, we don't need you now. So why should I come back and be be pacified by your kindness, because your kindness is not real.
The reality is that a bank, they're used to turning down African American business owners
Absolutely.
and still keeping their deposits.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
if you don't have enough money in the bank for them to feel when you leave, you can't make the impact. But if you have enough, when you walk out the door, someone gets in trouble, and they want to know how did you let this person get away?
Yeah. Absolutely.
But it's but they're used to keeping our money even though they turn us down.
Right.
But the other thing too is I'll just say this: as African Americans, we don't leverage our financial strength with banks by finding out what other companies that look like us are banking with them, and use that as collateral and use it as a benefit so that we can get better interest rates and we can get a much stronger relationships with banks. We tend to be a little bit more isolated than we should be. We don't network among ourselves as much as we could. And the reason is because I don't think we trust each other.
Well, and I think you're right. And they offer us terms because they believe we're uninformed.
Yes. Yes.
Most people think you have to put your house up. No.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
In the industry, it's actually called a nuisance lien.
Okay. Okay.
Because the house doesn't have enough equity in it to counterbalance the size of loan you want. So they just put it there to be a nuisance to you. That's what we called it in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one
that
of
makes sense.
That's one of the reasons that networking is so very, very important. Networking is not a one-way street, right? It's two-way. And just because I network, I may not have a need to do business with Pastor Nick, but Pastor Nick knows Bishop, and Bishop may need the service that I have, and he can put me in touch with them. So networking is not about just getting, and it's not about just giving. It's about looking at where there are those synergies that allow you to do something that may be 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 steps removed from what it is you're doing. So, for instance, you asked earlier about the companies and how have they been able to be perceived by some of the entities that they're looking to do business with. Well, just networking. If most of the big companies that are out there have to be in line with the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs and their SDGs, or the Sustainability Development Goals. Within those Sustainability Development Goals, there's 18 of them. And one of them in particular talks about decent work and economic growth. And in decent work and economic growth, it says within that goal that they want to make sure that they're doing business with not only people of color, but disabled folks, folks that have been realistically challenged in some shape or form. And that these companies, these big companies that we're hearing, the Pfizers, the Coca-Colas, the DuPonts, the Walmarts, the Targets, they're not just looking for somebody to say, we have a minority share in this business. They're saying, we need to do this because we've committed through the United Nations to work on these sustainability goals. It's not just workers, it's clean fuels, it's recycle, it's sustainable things. But through networking, you find all that stuff out, and then they're willing, they want you to come. They actually want you to come.
But one thing, keep in mind, the population is shifting. Diversity is here to stay. It's not a federal mandate. It's the fact that America is going to turn brown very soon in the next 20 years, white people will not be the majority. And that's very frightening to them because of the fact that they can't control. That's why politically, I buy Colgate's toothpaste and Crest toothpaste just like everybody else. So, if black folks stop buying their products, it hits them economically too. So they realize that they have to serve our community. And sometimes we go in with the idea that they're doing us a favor. And I make it clear to them, guess what? I'm using your products, all right? So if I'm doing this, I drink Coca-Cola and Pepsi. So my folks stop drinking Coke and Pepsi, you're gonna lose billions of dollars. So you ought to spend money with me also.
That's right.
But,
That's right.
but we are afraid to make that argument because we feel like diversity means that it's affirmative action, and it's not.
Mm-mm.
And if you have affirmative action mentality, the same thing in the banking industry too, And the other thing that I would say, two things I would say, if you're going to meet, you should meet with the decision makers. You don't need that little flunky down there who's taking your message back up to the main office.
Right.
I want to know the person who's making the decision. That's who I want to meet with. And if you meet with them, be prepared.
Yes, sir.
Make sure your stuff is tight, your financials are tight, your presentation is tight. Go in looking like that you're in control of your business. Okay. When we first started, people will ask us how big we were. We were probably about $100,000, but I would tell them we were $1.5 million. And they say, yeah, I said, oh yeah, we got contracts with it. Because if I have confidence in myself, and if I am trying to sell, you selling yourself and you building your brand. Brand is the most important. You are the brand. When you're in business, it's not your name. You are the brand. You represent that brand. And if you don't represent that brand with integrity, with solid financials, if you don't go in there with your game real tight. We got one of our first big contracts with Merck. And the guy told me, he said, I'm afraid to give you this business. He said, because I don't think you're big enough. I said, oh man, we way bigger than what you're giving us. we weren't, but I knew that I had to give confidence to him that I felt that I can do the job. And I believe that we could do the job because I knew we only had one time to make a mistake.
For the young, sorry.
Yeah, I say for young people, get off the plantation. When you learn in corporate America, learn as much as you can. Just don't be there to occupy the space, but find out how they do business. Find out exactly how they build their presentation, how they build their brands. And then go out yourself and be able to say, if I can do it for them as a VP or general manager, I can do it for myself.
Right.
That's right.
All I need is the opportunity.
Yeah. As for the young folk, as Jay-Z said, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman.
Exactly.
He himself is the business.
Well, and you have to know what kind of business you're in. Jay, he said it also. I was thinking today in the shower when I was thinking about this meeting, people in the music industry found out that they were not in the recording business. You're in the entertainment business.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So that's a whole bigger scope of stuff that you can do and how you can pivot to make things happen.
Yeah. We got a few questions coming up. Jane, did you want to chime in on anything before we move to the next topic?
No, let's go to the next one. I'm not going to.
Okay. Bishop, something that you guys really talked around was you said most people that you meet with, they know your plan immediately. Yeah. They just want to know, can they work with you? Can you kind of talk about that philosophy?
I think when you go to a meeting where you're trying to introduce yourself, or you're asking for participation from another company, or you're asking for whatever business arrangement you're there to petition, you have to be prepared for a long conversation. But what I found is that most successful people that are in CEO positions understand the deal in about 10 minutes. And you need to learn how to present an overview in 10 minutes and then ask them, do you have any questions you'd like to ask me? Because one of the things that turns them off is you having to make this 45-minute presentation when they've only got 30 minutes to meet with you. So because you spend 10 minutes explaining the deal, and then they spend the next 20 to 30 minutes trying to discern whether they want to work with you or not.
Right.
Well, we call
And
it
you call it what?
we call it the elevated speech.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
right.
That's right.
If you get
You
on the
gotta say it
elevator
all in
and
lessons
you're on the
and
10th floor, if you can't sell a guy by the time you get to the first floor, you're not going
you
to get
can't
to
sell
it.
them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a reality that you have to learn the language of the industry that you're a
Absolutely.
part of.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
People with real money converse differently than those of us that are trying to get there.
That's true.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking of I belong to this club in Philadelphia, and this one young guy who had made a bit of money was in a meeting with about 5 or 6 really wealthy men, and he was being aggressive and saying all kinds of things. And I'm sitting there observing because I'm looking at the way they interact with one another, which is why you can't be corporate and live in a bubble. You've got to get involved in conversations. You've got to hear how things are done, what the flow of power is, all of that. And he was really, I thought he was out of control. He wasn't raising his voice. And one of the senior guys said, "You're really making us uncomfortable right now." And his whole demeanor changed because he realized he'd stepped in it, he'd fallen into it. And what he was saying was, "We're not going to do business with you in about 5 minutes."
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I never forgot that day. "You're making me really uncomfortable right now." It spoke volumes to him. He understood it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
So it wasn't about his success, which he thought it was,
Mm.
because he thought his success gave him the permission to be aggressive.
Mhm.
When they were trying to figure out, can we have a relationship with this guy?
Right.
Yeah. That says a lot.
Yeah, it does.
Relationships don't make the world go around, as they say, and it's
Drives everything.
drives
Abs-
everything.
Absolutely. That's, and when we were speaking of networking, I mean, that's the value there, right? Because those relationships, people are still making deals based on who they know,
Mhm.
right? And what they know of you. So I believe that your wealth probably, lies in your relationships and
Mhm.
those that you can call in for a favor that can help you get to that next step. So I think most of our time we spend on building those relationships with our customers and other people. And as Bishop, you taught us years ago in Kingdom Heirs class, know your bankers, know your local,
Politicians.
politicians, and
Mhm.
those are people that you can reach out to when
Mhm.
you just need someone to help you get over a hump
Right.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and let's be real here. White people do it all the time.
all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And with their families, with their friends, they hook their people up.
Mhm.
You look at Hollywood; they have the Rat Pack back in the day when it was back when Sinatra and all them, and then you see these little Rat Packs, quote unquote, here and there every now and then. People put on who they're in a relationship with.
Mhm.
So we do have a question. It says, I know a couple of black men who partnered with white men to be the face of the business to get funding and business. What are your thoughts on this strategy?
Ooh. Because I was going to speak to that earlier. So, with my consulting business, which is providing services to colleges and universities, and I tend to deal with the big schools. So my very first customer was Meharry Medical College, right? And it's my son and I, and the fact that they're black and we're black, that does not matter. In fact, that makes them a little bit nervous. So I will tell you that the way we got in the door is I worked with my previous company, which is predominant, and they made the introductions, right? And because they needed my son and I to do the work to get a longer term contract, but they made the introductions, and which is fine. And the reason why I say that's fine, because at the end of the day, those 2 weeks, that was my company having to prove we knew what we were doing, right? So those other folks weren't there. But I think, and my mentors, 3 of my mentors are white males. So, and each one brings something different to the table. So I don't think that that's an issue, because that is the world that you're dealing with.
Mhm.
Whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're in corporate, whether you've got to deal with the banks, you've got to deal with attorneys, And so having those folks who can maybe clear a path, having those folks who can give you some insight or say, hey, not that one, this one, right? I think that makes a lot of sense. And why not, right? They're willing to do it for each other. They're willing to do it for those who show that they've got the stuff it takes to do it, right? And so to the earlier point about your stuff has to be tight. Our stuff has to be tighter than tight, right? Absolutely. For whatever field it is, whether it's in the medical, whether it's in some of the other areas that we're talking about. And so having people of a different race or the predominant race, be the lead so that you can get your foot in the door. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I have a little different perspective. I think that has some validity, but it also has some major drawbacks to it. And the reason for that is if it becomes a pass-through business, at the end of the day, you're not going to sustain yourself without them. And you need to be able to, at some point, to be autonomous. So I would say you have to look at those partnerships and the value of those partnerships. If they're financing these, they're putting the money up, and you're just the front person. At the end of the day, you're going to lose. Okay. So you have to, I say when you're doing business partnership, it's always what is the value of that partnership. I partnered with a company years ago from Germany, and we had a somewhat of a good relationship, but our value systems weren't the same. We didn't have the same values. We didn't look at the markets the same. So it really became very controversial, and I immediately cut the relationship. And as a result of that, we were able to do better with them than without them than we were with them. So I think that you need to look at every partnership, and that partnership means that you need to have the same values, the same vision for the business, and you need to have clarity on who owns what. Okay, and at some point they can be good boosters for you, but at some point you may have to cut them loose and stand on your own, because you really want to build your own business. So I would say there is no rule of thumb, negative or positive, except for the fact that if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks like a duck when you're doing a partnership, it's a duck.
It's a duck. That's right.
I think I can speak to it from experience. I started my business as a subcontractor because starting out, I had enough money to buy the equipment that I needed, but I needed the contracts. I needed the insurance coverage because I did not have the income to cover all those bases. My mindset was that I was not going to subcontract for more than 3 years. So instead of, and I had to sign a right not to compete clause for those 3 years. So while I was subcontracting, I did a lot of the work myself so I could learn the business from the ground up. And then I started to invest in equipment so that when the 3 years ended, having saved money, having shopped brokers for insurance, having got, all the things that you needed in order to be solid, I was ready to launch at the end of 3 years. But I think some people go in and don't start sacrificing like you need to build a future of independence on your own, and end up trapped in a subcontracting or partnership position for 10, 15, 20 years. Some never get out of that flow. But you have to have a mindset that I'm going to be independent, and then do what you need to do to be prepared for that independence in the very near future.
You just answered somebody's, because Tisha asked the question, said that she was subcontracted. So you're saying that could be a good start to build towards where you want to go.
The contract is extremely important. Yep. Because when you're subbing, they take a nice percentage of your money every month. which means that if you're going to make money subcontracting, you're going to have to do some work. So that meant I was banking during the day and cleaning buildings during the evening. Some people are not willing to do that.
That's true.
But I knew if I didn't do that, I wouldn't save on the labor, the matching, all that, Social Security and all that, in order to position myself to be able to move. And I did some radical things. I sold both of my cars, bought a car that people laughed at, just so I could afford equipment. Some people are not going to make those sacrifices
That's
up
true.
front.
That's true. That's very true.
But I was determined I was not going to subcontract for long.
Yeah.
And in the bank, I financed deals where the minority partner had the impression that he or she was the company that they were fronting for. They had this delusion, when in reality, they may have given them 2% of it so they could get the minority contracts. They did, and some of them never learned how that worked. So they never learned how to apply for the minority business. So they became trapped again, getting this 2% and it not changing. And then once they have a reputation for getting this business, they jettison the small partner.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That happens. Yeah. Or they found another one to replace them when they decide to cut your percentages of the business down. So,
Yeah,
you start off with 4%, then it becomes 2%. And then pretty soon you say, I can't live on 2%. They say, well, I'll find somebody else to replace you then.
absolutely.
Wow. Wow. Somebody else had a question about credit unions versus banks. Now, this is not anybody have any expertise or thoughts in that process?
I think at certain levels of business, a credit union could serve you. It depends on the credit union.
Yep.
I think sometimes a credit union is a little more open to a small business than a conventional bank would be. I know I had a sensitivity for small businesses. So, I couldn't give them credit lines, but I could give them bridge loans for 2 quarters to get them to the place where they needed to be. And a lot of times I didn't require their homes. I just required their equipment and maybe a lien on their accounts receivable.
That's a good
Okay.
idea.
That's good. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's an excellent idea. Some of the big corporations now are doing that when they won't give you a credit line. They'll just put a lien on your receivables. And that's not a bad way to do it, except for the fact it does impact your DMB score, though.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Now, it's almost 7:45. I had a couple other topics, but maybe this will be the last topic because I got to run by 8, something like that. Talking about working it with excellence. A lot of people think because I got a business, I can just work it whenever. And
No.
Bishop, you talk a lot about how you got to work it like you're punching the clock.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think we got to talk about
punching the clock.
Yeah.
When I've mentored African American businessmen and women, what I discovered very early in the process, is some people cannot manage the liberty of being self-employed. They think being self-employed means you can just cancel all your appointments for the afternoon and go shopping. I had to have a me day and just crazy stuff that you hear. And that really means to me, you're not ready to own your own business.
That's right. Yeah.
Because you don't work it like you were working for someone else. So some people need an overseer to be productive.
It's a 24/7 job.
It really
And
is.
if you're not committed for 24/7, then you don't want to get it. And then the other part of it too is you have to be willing to take the risk. There's risk in anyone who is an entrepreneur. If you're trying to play it safe, don't get into it. If you're trying to make a quick buck, don't get into it because it may not come exactly when. And a lot of times you're going to experience debt, and it's how you manage your debt. How do you manage the resources that you have?
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems too. Let me address this with you. You didn't say anything about it. One of the struggles that African American businesses have is keeping good employees. And some of the employees that we have the most difficult with are African Americans.
Absolutely.
You know, they work for us and feel like that, you know, if I need to take off the day to go to the dentist or doctor, my baby is sick this morning, I can't come in. You know, but you don't do that for the white business. but you feel
Exactly.
but you feel like that, you know, and then you say, you know, you're not, you know, we're brothers and sisters in this. Yes, we are, but we also run the business. So don't get it twisted. You know, if you're expected to come to work on and they coming to work on time, that's another problem. You know, as long as I get there. No, that's not the way you do it.
No.
So some of the biggest struggles that we have and some of the biggest turnover we have been with people of color.
Absolutely.
Deborah, you work in this field. You do the whole minority hiring piece. Can you shed some light on that too? What you doing where you work?
So I want to first, if you don't mind, address this employee issue because it's something that's very close to the business that my husband and I run together. And also, Bishop, you warned us about this several years ago.
Yes.
But just keeping good employees and having them committed to what it is that they're being tasked with and what Alvin and I have learned, and this is just recently, we've been in business for 14, no, not quite 14, maybe 12 years now, is that we need to separate the business that he's involved in and the HR perspective. He's involved in the business where he is interacting with the employees. Therefore, relationships are being built as a result of that interaction. We need to separate that from the rest of the business. So I am now the HR person, right? If there's an issue with an employer and HR, something comes up, it's something that I deal with to keep Alvin out of it. And that has helped. We see that is helping us make the hard decisions, but the right decisions, right?
Right.
And to your point, what you were asking, Pastor Nick, what I'm in the business of right now, working for an MBE, is selling out MBE services, right, to corporations, right? And I've been participating in quite a few supply diversity fairs with Wells Fargo, UPS, and a lot of the big box companies. And what I'm learning from them, which I thought was very telling, and it makes me tell the story of my company differently now, is they have all these millions of dollars committed to doing business with minority suppliers, right? However, my story used to start is we're 100% minority owned, MBE certified, blah, 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 blah. And from participating in these webinars, I've learned that they know that because I'm there. They want to know that we can deliver on the promise and the commitment that we're making. And decisions are made based on obviously your expertise and the value that you can bring. And hey, this is a minority supplier diversity fair. And because you're a minority owned company, we want to do business with you, but not because of that, but because you can do all the work
Because you can do it.
and the bonuses that you're minority owned. So that's helped me change the sales story that I'm telling when I'm speaking to prospective clients on behalf of my company now.
Yeah.
You know, so we have to make sure that we can actually deliver on the promise.
Right.
And be able to demonstrate that. And whatever we commit to, it has to be quantifiable and measurable so that they can see that. So when you were saying earlier about knowing your numbers, you have to know that inside and out, all of your metrics.
Because isn't part of hiring, and I'd love for y'all to chime in on this, if you're the owner, I've heard of a lot of business owners taking a hit on their salary to pay for people to come and help build the business. So they'll have people, they'll purposely cut their salary back on purpose so that the business can grow. Can anybody talk about that? Because to me, it sounds like you can't be selfish and greedy. Well, obviously, selfish and greedy people have built great businesses, but there's a certain degree of sacrifice involved. There you go. In order to build it. Can somebody chime in on that? Oh, sorry. You're mute. Unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Sure.
Yeah. I think that is very noble. And when we first got started, I did that. But here's what the problem is. You don't really get a real clear financial picture of your finances as a company. You have to pay yourself. You can make sacrifices, but if you don't add your salary into it, when you do your P&L, you will find out that your P&L is not a real reflection of the cost it is to run that business. So
Yes.
you can do that for a period of time. You may not take a bonus, but ultimately you have to factor that into your financials. Okay, because your value, if you're not there, that business is not going to work.
There's
And
no
so you
business.
need you need to make sure that you are paid. You may not be paid $1 million, but you need to pay yourself what your value is to that company, and you need to roll it in because that's a real true picture of your finance. You'll start to doing things and realize that that your financials are not really reflective of the total value that you're bringing into the business. You know, and so I would say I cautious you. I think it's be very cautious about doing that.
Right.
You may defer at some point in time, but
Yeah.
ultimately, I did it when we first got started, and I thought I was doing a great thing. And then I realized that what I was really doing in some ways, I was really making the business suffer because if I needed to go out to get a credit line so that I could be financially solvent, I should have done that rather than trying to take it out of my pocket because it's not
Right.
sustainable.
Yeah,
It's
and
not sustainable.
I think you can look at other areas aside from your salary, right? Where you look for other opportunities to cut back or reduce your operating expenses to
Right.
invest in a person who you
Yes.
believe can
Yes.
drive the business
Yes.
or bring in additional revenue. But I agree. I don't think it's in the salary of the individual. I think it's your other operating expenses where you can reduce to supplement that salary to get that great person on board.
I think one of the things that I discovered when I was in business was the type of employee I had to center on that could help the vision of the business go forward.
Excellent.
I did not hire anyone who didn't have consistent obligations.
Mm.
So my employees, and it wasn't discrimination. I couldn't have somebody not coming to work because they had a headache. I needed the tyranny of necessity to
Yeah.
drive them to the job every day.
Yes.
Child in college,
Yes.
some situation at home, something that
Yes.
was more than just I don't feel like going in today. And when I stumbled on that, I realized I had mature people working for me. And most of the problems that I had after that were with younger folk, and I hate to say it, or family.
Oh, family.
Bishop, you said it. You ain't saying but nothing but a word right now.
It's
Well,
just,
I think that speaks to the fact that you have to be very careful how you bring family in. If they bring value, bring them in. But let me speak to the people first. I think the key to success in business is hiring the best people,
mhm.
hiring people who see the vision, who can help you execute on the vision. Rather than looking at their salary, you have to look at their value because they will pay for themselves. If you have a mediocre employee who's not like Bishop won't come in when they have a headache, you're going to lose money. You're losing money when you have an employee or manager who's not productive. It's costing you money, okay? And it'll cost you money to try to get a second person to fill in what on the job that they're not doing. So hire good people, people that'll make you stretch. Sometimes you have to pay more for
I think we tend to take chances on employees depending on the stress level that we are experiencing in our place of employment.
them. That's true.
And sometimes for a CEO, it's the resistance to doing the job yourself until you hire someone who can actually
Right.
add to
That's a good point.
your company.
That's
There's an
that's an
emotional thing that I don't want to do it, and you end up hiring someone that costs you so much more money,
right.
costs you contracts, costs you good employees. I mean, it's
Right.
just
Right.
And
it's,
cost you time, and they cost
yeah,
you time too, right? You really want
absolutely.
to. How do you get the right person in the right job at the right time?
Right
Mhm.
time.
I may be good for the job, but it may not be the right time for me to be in that job.
Right,
And I might be the right person, but it's the wrong job. So right person, the right job at the right time. Whether you're in corporate America, whether you're an entrepreneur, that is so key to making sure that you're successful in whatever it is you're doing.
Absolutely.
But one of the key things too is if you hire a person to be your VP of marketing, you need to get the heck out of marketing and start spending your time doing something else.
That's
So
right.
if they're going to do the job and you're going to do it too, you don't need them.
You don't
So
need them.
that,
Right.
you have to be able to delegate. You got to be able to say, okay, I'm trust, but that does not mean that you don't test and measure to make sure they're doing what you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah.
Right.
But you should be sitting over there doing the finances when you got a CEO who's over there, a CFO who's doing it for you.
Right.
That's the waste of your time. You need to put your time and value in someplace else.
Well, it's no different than in the Bible when the deacons were found, right? So the pastors can go and pray and study. They were to tend to the people. Same with these jobs. You know, you running the company. Okay, so I got some other people that are doing those things that need to be done because I have to do this. I have to be looking at the strategy. I have to be, making sure that the financial acumen is right, or political savvy, or organizational agility, whatever it is. There are things that you have to do that if you don't get the right people doing what they're supposed to do, it's gonna minimize your impact to the overall business.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about entrepreneurs or in the corporate world, and you're at a level of a vice president or whatever the level, running a large division. I think I've talked about I have 170 folks, but the only way I could manage was knowing that I have very good directors over the various work streams.
Absolutely.
And that I can meet with them every other week and know that if they need me, they're going to call on me, but otherwise they're doing what they need to do. And I'm not calling the check on them every day. Right. So that means you're hiring good people, but it also means sometimes you got to let some folks go.
That's true.
Who can't do that.
So the other question,
your realm is in to make it work, to be successful. I talk about, I have my right-hand person, my left-hand person, all of those things, my lieutenants, they've got to be on top as you are, because I need them to do this. So I'm not doing this because I'm supposed to be doing something else. And if I have to do what we're hired to do, then you're out, right? Until I find that right person. So I think that's a tactic you have to take. Otherwise your business cannot really thrive.
Mm-hmm.
But let me speak to one thing too. You have to also realize what size you are too, because sometimes when you're a small business and you're a startup business, you have to wear multiple hats.
You got to do everything. That's right.
So don't be walking around handing people cards and say you're the president, CEO of a company that has one person.
Right. Yeah. And you also keep bottle washer and everything.
Exactly.
Lord have mercy.
Don't get it twisted.
Yeah.
It's only a title when you're that small.
Right. Look, it's almost 8:00, y'all. Thank y'all for coming on. Thank you all. Thank you for all the panelists. Bishop, BPA team, myself, Pastor Winfred Sanders. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And we're going to do some more panels for small business owners and corporate stuff and some finance things. People are making money during this pandemic. Not just billionaires, but there are people that are starting businesses.
Yes.
We're going to get somebody going to teach you how to do all the online stuff, because they are making money with all these algorithms and all these things. And God can do it in any time. Bishop,
my thing that I always tell my team is opportunities always appear at the highest level during chaos.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Don't let this crisis go to waste.
It's here. It's here.
Yeah.
Bishop, any last words you want to share with everybody?
I'm encouraged by the conversation. Also, it kind of confirms for us as a ministry what part of the emphasis for the power of God that we didn't have was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the complete tracks we had was marketplace. Yeah. That was going to be business and whatever was needed to start a business, maintain it, importance of contracts, all those things are going to be one of the curriculums during Power of God. And I see once again, it's affirmed to me, or confirmed, how much it's needed.
Yep.
Because we're starting businesses based on enthusiasm and not expertise and knowledge.
Right.
And there's a difference between motivation and inspiration. Mm-hmm. Motivation won't get you through a barrier. Mm-hmm. Inspiration will.
Yep.
So we've got to be clear. I'm excited for those people that want the yoke of business, because it does pay.